everybody. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. This is episode number 152. And my name is Henry.
And my name is Paul.
And this week we have a review of The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou from 2004, which is currently on Amazon Prime. And then I figured we'd talk about some of the big news pieces this week, including the very controversial HBO Max Warner Brothers deal set for next year, where all Warner Brothers films will be released on HBO Max the same day as theaters, which of course has Christopher Nolan in flames. And then also just hot off the presses, the Spider-Man 3 buzz concerning Alfred Molina returning as Doc Ock, as well as potentially Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, and potentially Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. So we'll get to all of that. We have a pick of the week. I mean, it should be great. Paul?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty to talk about, because also with the HBO deal, they finally have announced what their first 4K title will be. We'll talk about that later.
Oh, great.
So, it's going to be a good show.
Yeah. Well, how you doing these days?
Pretty good. Working on this show, working on Sane Show. I submitted the novella that I wrote to a competition, so I'll hear back from that in May, I think.
Oh, sweet.
Assuming that I make it that far.
Sure.
So we'll just have to see where it goes.
Awesome, man. Well, best of luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I'm in my final week of the semester in my music business program, so things are heating up pretty quick. But otherwise, doing fine, just staying busy and doing some interviews for the Music Buds podcast and just, usual stuff. So all considering, doing well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. Well, not too much else to mention, really. Paul, anything come to mind that you want to say before we get to it?
No, I mean, it's my birthday tomorrow. I'm turning 28.
Happy early birthday, man.
Thank you. Yeah, that's about it.
Any big plans?
Not tomorrow, but Saturday, my wife and I have been watching the Godfather films. We watched the first one, we watched the second one, and since the re-edit of the third one came out, Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone, we're going to watch that on Saturday.
Oh, sweet. That'll be a good time.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, that's true.
It's Coppola with a re-edit. It could go either way.
Yeah. Well, cool. I mean, I guess that is about it of in-house stuff to mention. So I guess we can get to it. We can get to our review of The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which we do have a clip as well. So take a listen.
These are great.
May I turn this on?
Fire one.
So what happened, in your opinion?
What are you talking about?
Well, don't you think the public perception of your work has significantly altered in the last 5 years?
That's your first question? I thought this was supposed to be a puff piece.
Should we come back to it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it true that this is going to be your last voyage?
Wow. No comment. Who told you that? No, goddammit. I'm only 52. I'm always start out with some stock dialogue. Favorite color, blue, favorite food, sardines.
How do you feel about part one of your new film?
Why? How do you feel about part one of my new film?
Well, I'm honest, so...
Just say it.
I thought aspects of it seemed slightly fake.
All right. So as we said, The Life Aquatic came out in 2004 and is directed by Wes Anderson, co-written by Wes Anderson as well. And it stars Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, Cate Blanchett, Angelica Houston, Willem Dafoe, Jeff Goldblum, Michael Gambon, Noah Taylor, Sue George, Robin Cohen. I mean, Bud Cort. The list goes on and on. Paul, am I forgetting anybody?
No, I don't think so.
All right. And the synopsis is with a plan to exact revenge on a mythical shark that killed his partner, oceanographer Steve Zissou rallies a crew that includes his estranged wife, a journalist, and a man who may or may not be his son. So this one, Paul, we've talked about Wes Anderson on the show already, and we had been wanting to do this for a while, so it's nice we got the chance. Do you want to kick things off? Or
Sure. So I saw this movie back in 2005 for the first time. I saw it like a year after it came out in theaters and flopped. And I was super interested in it at the time that it came out, but I was like 12, I guess, when it came out. And it was rated R, and so my mom was like, absolutely not. But I remember like walking past the theater that had The Life Aquatic. I was super, super interested in seeing this movie. It was Bill Murray. It was R-rated. I was like, just getting to that point where I wanted to start seeing R-rated films as a teenager.
Sure.
And so I was just really curious about it. And like a year later, I finally watched it. My mom finally, was like, you're 13, you can watch it. And by that point, I think I had seen Gladiator. And
well, then,
yeah, everything's out the window after that. So
yeah.
I sat down and I watched it on like iTunes. I bought it off of iTunes and watched it that way. It was like right when they had movies. And I loved it. I thought that it was a great time. I loved how weirdly dry it was. I enjoy a very dry sense of humor. I also liked how just kind of kooky and weird it was. That was around the same time, I think, that like I was like a few years from that, I would watch like I Heart Huckabees, and like Stranger Than Fiction was also like 2 years after this.
Right.
And so like, I liked those kind of, I was really getting into that kind of like ultra dry, but also kind of whimsical in a way sort of stories. And for me, I then found out later on, once I became like a film person and started talking to other sort of film people, that this was like a much hated film. And I was really, really surprised by that. And it was, this kind of like massive backlash to how people didn't like it after Royal Tenenbaums. But I think it's a great one. And I have seen a lot of people go back and revisit it and be like, wow, we really like just, beat the shit out of this film for not much reason. Because I think it's a really, really good one. I think that, he's always doing stories about fatherhood, and this is another great one. And I very much enjoy it. I think it's got some great performances, some really standout performances. What do you think?
Yeah, well, now, did you say that this was your favorite Wes Anderson, or?
It's my first... And in a way, it is my favorite. My actual like favorite is probably Grand Budapest, but Life Aquatic is my first, and therefore it's kind of like a sentimental favorite.
Gotcha. Well, so we did talk about it briefly a few weeks ago. This one was actually one of the last ones that I saw. The first one, and it's still my favorite, is Fantastic Mr. Fox. And as I said before, it is one I enjoy a fair bit. There's not a Wes Anderson movie that I dislike even remotely, but I think it is my least favorite. Okay. And I do find that I'm all up for a kind of a meandering journey, and it's just pretty narrativeless. But with that kind of film, you kind of have to be really invested in the story to stick with it. And in the few times that I've watched it, I can't fully get into the story and the world, and so I think that holds me back a little bit compared to other Wes Anderson films that I have that deeper connection with. So that would be my main, I guess, distance from the movie. But overall, I still enjoy it. It's still, as you said, it's dry and weird and very... It's within its own world so much, and that's kind of cool to see a director like this be so unattached to everything and just do his own film in his own world. And I mean, the cast across the board is excellent. Kate Blanchett is awesome. She can do anything. Bill Murray, Owen Wilson. I mean, it's a great time. It's just that with a journey film, there are going to be lulls and exciting points, and I do find that there are a few too many lulls for me to really love it.
Okay. I completely get that. I mean, it definitely is. I think that out of all of his films, it is probably the one that is a little bit more like you're either, for the most part, you're either gonna dig it or just not. I think a lot of his films are pretty easy to just sort of latch onto and sort of go with just because they are so weird and you can kind of distance yourself from them. But this film essentially is sort of, to give it a little bit of context, I guess, and I talked about this, I think, before, you know, Bottle Rocket was just kind of like a movie. But then his next film, Rushmore, was a play within a movie. And that's why you get the curtain call at every single season change. And then Royal Tenenbaums is meant to be like a children's sort of storybook, New York story. And then with this, you're kind of really getting this documentary as a movie, which sounds weird since a documentary is a movie, but, you know, it has this harsh, unflinching kind of, with the exception of the claymation sea creatures, it has this very harsh, unflinching kind of, here's what it is, way of telling the story.
Right.
That some of his other films don't have. Usually his stories do have that kind of constant go, that constant buzz, that energy, and that really fabulous presentation. But this, it's like, you know, whatever, you know, the lighting is and whatever the angle is, no one looks good in the movie for the most part. It's, I think, one of his least attractive movies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I think that for me, I guess the thing that really sells it for me is I love Bill Murray. I love Jeff Goldblum, especially. And the real standout performance for me of the entire film is Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
His Klaus is fantastic. This highly neurotic, but also highly emotional German man, you know?
Yeah.
He doesn't have the same kind of, you know, calm, cool, collected German veneer that I think everyone thinks of. He's actually very much a very soft-hearted, sort of emotional spirit. And Owen Wilson, this is one of my favorite Owen Wilson performances. I think that he does his best work with Wes. I don't know why he doesn't get more varied roles, or maybe it's just that Wes is the only person that he trusts, you know, outside of doing his wow shtick.
Sure.
But, you know, he does his best work with Wes, and I think that this was also, for me, like, I had seen, I think, by the time I finally saw this, I had also seen Wedding Crashers. And so
it's a
then,
classic.
you know, comparing him from what I had seen him in, which was like Shanghai Noon and Shanghai Nights and The Wedding Crashers, to suddenly this role in Life Aquatic was a really big, you know, turnaround for me on my opinion of Owen Wilson, who I liked but didn't think was ever going to be able to do anything that, like, you know, surprised me. But I really enjoy this film. Again, it's not for everyone. I'll agree with that for sure. And I will never tell, like, you know, anyone to watch this. I'm usually pretty particular in my people that I recommend this one to. I'll recommend Grand Budapest. I'll recommend Royal Tenenbaums. I'll even recommend Fantastic Mr. Fox. But usually if I'm suggesting Life Aquatic, it's because I think that you're someone who will enjoy just kind of the bluntness of the movie.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and we should say Owen Wilson co-wrote a lot of the early Wes Anderson movies. Not this one. Noah Baumbach, who also did Fantastic Mr. Fox, did this one, but that is kind of a cool little collaboration there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I would agree with Owen Wilson. I've always liked him. I think this is one of his better ones, and it's very subdued, and I think that really works, more nuanced than you're used to seeing him in. And I agree with that, and I like the relationship between him and Bill Murray, and then between him and Cate Blanchett. I think that works pretty well. I would agree with the somewhat unattractive nature of the movie. I think that it's very colorful. I don't know if the colors always mesh, but also I don't know if they are meant to all the time. It is such an odd story that it kind of works. I do love the look of the island, Bill Murray's island, where there's like the fortress or castle on the edge, and the beaches, and like the jellyfish sequence on the beach. That stuff is great. And there's even that sequence, it's very short, where I think it's Willem Dafoe slaps Owen Wilson. They're like on a dock or a pier, I think, and just the look of certain scenes like that are fantastic. But I think that with the meandering nature of the movie, when they actually get on the journey, that's where it kind of is inconsistent for me. Actually, I think my favorite part is when they're on the island. It's just kind of contained and simple, for lack of a better word. So I like all that stuff. And yeah, it's rougher on the edges, and I think that could really work for people and other people not. You know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the standout moments of the film are probably the Ping Island escape sequence, the rescue mission. It's got that great score that just gets stuck in your head, that has a great rhythm and a great pulse to it. And you get some great humor in that scene with Klaus having his little fit about not getting picked, and with Jeff Goldblum's response to when he's getting rescued. Especially with him wearing an I'm a Pepper shirt that's too small for him.
Yeah.
It's little touches that can really make a joke land. But I think that it's a really fun scene. Some other really standout scenes for me are definitely, honestly, the opening sequence where you watch Esteban die. I think that it's just absolutely hilarious. There's pandemonium and confusion.
Yeah, that's classic Wes Anderson. Just chaos. Yeah.
No one knows what's going on, really.
Yeah.
It's a great scene. No, I don't have a lot, I guess. I definitely understand the meandering nature of it, but also I'm someone who loves the story The Odyssey, and if you want to talk about a meandering journey,
sure,
yeah, look no further. So, but no, you're not wrong. It has there's a lot of slack in that middle. It's not a taut narrative in any kind of way. But I guess also that's maybe the nature of actually being in pursuit of some sort of aquatic animal, where you are unable to track it in a consistent fashion, is just kind of hurry up and wait.
Right.
But no, I really... Oh, also, I forgot. In case we were talking about people who were in the film, in case anyone out there is just the biggest Criminal Minds fan.
Sure, of course.
And you can't get enough Matthew Gray Gubler. You can see him in a small bit part in this film as one of the interns.
Oh.
I think he gets one line. He's the intern that gets hit with the machete.
Oh, nice.
When the ship gets taken over.
Yeah.
So, if you need more Matthew Gray Gubler in your life and you've watched Criminal Minds too many times, you can go and watch a young him.
Yeah, for the niche audience.
Yeah. You know what? They're out there. They're very real.
For sure. But no, talking about that sequence, I do like the line where Bill Murray says, "Don't shoot them, they're unpaid interns." And they're on this ridiculous ship in the middle of nowhere, and the interns are wearing zip up hoodies and t-shirts, that stuff is great. The underwater filming sequence where there's the plane, the downed plane, where that kind of harkens back to kind of the look of classic Hollywood adventure fantasy movies like Black Lagoon, things like that remind me of that very over the top, very classic look. And you can see how much Wes Anderson loves that kind of film. But yeah, it's one that I have watched probably 3 or 4 times, and I'll continue to rewatch it. And I feel like my interest, it almost changes every time I watch it. Sometimes I'm loving it and really enjoying it, and then other times a little less so. But it is still a very peculiar, interesting part of Wes Anderson's filmography that is really worth watching if you like his films, or if you want something, as you've said, kind of out there and strange.
Yeah. If you are gonna do, Wes Anderson, I think that you have to look at the whole filmography, just because, one, it's not that extensive. I mean, it's 8 or 9 films at this point, similar amount to Quentin. So you don't have to go through many. It's not like you're trying to get through the Bond film catalog, But it tells a whole story, and you can really see a filmmaker progress and try a lot of different things. And so if you haven't gotten around to this one, definitely I do recommend circling back to it. And if you have seen it and you didn't like it the first time, honestly, give it another shot, because you just might like it more on a second attempt. It's one that I think benefits more from a rewatch than some of his other ones.
Yeah.
All of them are rewatchable, but this one really benefits a lot.
Yeah.
So what's your Fantastic Mr. Fox is your favorite? This is on the least favorite side. What are some other ones that are like, make the top 3 and kind of like the bottom 2?
I really like I love Bottle Rocket. That's another meandering Wes Anderson, but that's one I really get invested in pretty immediately. I think Bottle Rocket would be in the top 3. I think Royal Tenenbaums, I think those would be my top 3. I think Royal Tenenbaums has like a great emotion, and I really connect with that. I think that's one of his more emotional, more heartfelt films, and I really connect with that. So I think Fox, Tenenbaums, and Bottle Rocket would be top 3, and then probably again I would give it at least a 4 out of 5. Probably Grand Budapest would be that, and Aquatic would be my least favorite, quote unquote.
Okay.
What about you?
My top 3 are probably Life Aquatic, Grand Budapest, and I'll say Royal Tenenbaums for third favorite. It is like the most sort of, quotes around it, Wes Anderson of Wes Anderson films. Bottom 2, Bottle Rocket, and maybe Fantastic Mr. Fox, but that might just be because it's one that I haven't really like revisited again since the last time that I watched it, and the last time that I watched it was college. So maybe if I go back and rewatch it, I'll have a whole new appreciation.
Yeah, man, we're on the just exact opposite sides, Paul.
Yeah, we really are. Like we're very opposite in our taste of Wes Anderson. At least we both have Royal Tenenbaums in the top. But
that's true. Yeah. Well, anything else about Life Aquatic or Wes in general?
No, there's a great series of video essays. I think I mentioned this before, that pair along with a book of written essays all about his film career, written by a Texas-based film critic who's been following him since Bottle Rocket was a short. And if you ever want to go and just kind of do like a deep dive into any of his films, go and look that up. It's like Wes Anderson film essays. I think they're mostly on Vimeo. I think they're easier to find on Vimeo than YouTube. So go and give those a look if you want to get like more of a deep dive into him. I don't think that he's made a terrible film yet. He's one of the few that has made one that, is like, oh, what a lag. Even Quentin Tarantino has at least one that stands out in my mind as like that could have been better.
Which one's that?
It's Jackie Brown, and everyone knows it.
I'm the same.
So
I was, when I saw that for the first time, I was like, is this actually Quentin? I was like, I like it to a degree, but I would agree that's my least favorite of his.
I mean, you want to talk about meandering.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Long stroll.
Now, are you normally a video essay person, Paul? Or do you like to watch like YouTube film essays, analysis, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Every once in a while. I'm pretty selective about it. I think a lot of people sound like idiots.
Yes.
But
me included for the ones I've done.
There are a few that I'm like, this is pretty good. This is good quality stuff. There's a guy, Just Right. He's pretty good. I like Nerd Writer, just because Nerd Writer also does some stuff that isn't like film essays. No, I like them. It's just I am very selective. Like, as far as the things that are in my subscriptions on YouTube, they definitely take up a smaller square footage.
Yeah. All right. Well, well. I mean, I've kind of written them on the show. I've kind of written them off. I don't know. I've made a few on YouTube that you can watch, but I think I enjoy making them more than I do enjoy watching them. I think the kind of quote unquote magic of movies is kind of lost on me when I sit there and watch someone explain it all to me, And like it was almost the same thing being at UNC Greensboro where you and I went to school, and like the Coen brothers class. Were we in that class together, Paul?
Yes.
Okay.
It was you, me, and Bowers, wasn't it?
Might have been, yeah.
And Swafford.
I think it was, yeah. That was what a class that was. It drove me off the wall because like it got down to the point of like the teacher saying, and you see the circles there in the background, that means it goes around in a loop, and that's whatever, and it broke the movies down so much to the point where it was not interesting to watch anymore because I felt like I knew everything about it. And so I tend to stay away from them, but that's purely personal taste. I mean, there are plenty of great ones out there. It's just whatever you are trying to get out of it,
No, absolutely. Our professor, dear Dr. Adams, I had taken 2 classes with Dr. Jeffrey Adams. I took, both of them were, I can't remember what the title was. It was like MST like 521 or something, and like the topic changed every semester. And you could take 2 of them. And so I took horror, and I took Coen Brothers. And the horror class, I enjoyed a lot of what we talked about, like 90%, sometimes only 85, because every once in a while, like you said, he would get like so deep into it. I remember we were talking about like the horror genre. We were talking about Evil Dead and how the home, gets subverted into this kind of monstrous femme, place of danger, and how, it went all the way down to the same kind of, I guess, graphic content warning. This sort of level of, the house when the pipe bursts open and the blood is coming out of him, how it's meant to simulate or, symbolize menstrual blood. And it was at that moment that, like, I was just like, all right, I'm done. I'm turning off for the rest of this lecture.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't have disagreed more.
Yeah, Evil Dead is now ruined.
And so he was always a guy who could go, like, super, super deep in, and some of his insights I always did find really worthwhile, but some of them were always a little bit... He could always hit a point where I was you're reaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can definitely go too deep into it. I usually, if I watch a film essay, I'm looking at someone who's looking very specifically at a single character or a single concept from that film that they're trying to really break down, not kind of the whole thing. But yeah, Dr. Adams, he was an odd duck. Also, don't forget, he was a little bit prejudiced because in his book and in his class, he completely ignored the movie Burn After Reading because he thought that it was just bad.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And he could not be more wrong.
No, that movie's gold, by the way. It's hilarious. So
now, in that, not to get too far off track here, but in that class, one thing I did find interesting that I hadn't really thought about was like how you can really read as much as you want into Coen Brothers movies or not at all, and you can still get a level of enjoyment out of, like the cat in Inside Llewyn Davis. Like that, you could see so many different things into that part of the film, or you could just see it as a cat being a cat, and you could still enjoy the movie. And so I thought that part of our discussion was interesting. And but I agree, he would, again, like with the circles and all the Wes Anderson or in the Coen Brothers movies, things like that would kind of take me out of it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Just as one last little quick Jeff Adams story that I think you'll enjoy. There was one day where the projector didn't work, and he literally had a hissy fit. But beyond that, he then turns around and he's like, "Okay, class, how about who here has seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre?" And a few people raised their hands. He's like, "Okay, let's explain what happens in Texas Chainsaw Massacre to the people in class who haven't."
Oh God.
And someone raises their hand, and he's like, "All right, start." And she's like, "Okay, so there are these teenagers in this car." And he's like, "No, go further back. Start at the opening credits." And he begins to explain, and he literally takes 45 minutes to just explain in painstaking detail the entire film of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. it hits a point of hysteria where people are just kind of looking at each other and falling into laughter. Just kind of in the sheer what in the fuck is happening right now.
Yeah,
of it all.
That would be like podcast gold if you had the audio of that. That could just be an episode on its own.
Oh god.
Maybe that could be a fun new little bit for us. We could try and explain a movie in like 45 minutes, see how long we can go. Yeah, that sounds like him. I never had the pleasure of taking that class, but I feel like I just did.
You really missed out.
Yeah. All right, well, out of 5 for Life Aquatic, I'll go 4.
I'll go 4.5.
All right. Well, with that done, I guess we can get to some of the big news pieces of the week. So the first one that has caused so much controversy is the HBO Max Warner Brothers deal, which basically lays out that every Warner Brothers movie is going to premiere on HBO Max the same day as in theaters. And so that includes, I have a list here. Of course, that's is Wonder Woman exclusively going to be on HBO Max, or is that getting theaters as well?
It's getting theaters as well, and that's actually also the title that's going to be the first bit of 4K content.
Gotcha.
One of the big things when HBO Max dropped was that even though they had released some of these titles that were on HBO Max in 4K wasn't supported yet on the platform.
Gotcha.
So Wonder Woman 1984 is going to be their first bit of 4K supported content. I imagine all of their theatrical releases will probably follow suit.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Well, I mean, I guess to give people some perspective here, so there's a list here of the movies that will be hitting HBO Max. Paul's favorite, the Tom and Jerry film, the live action, coming out in March. We have Godzilla versus Kong in May. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It in June. In the Heights, the musical, coming out in June as well. The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad. And I guess that maybe the biggest one of all is Dune, coming out in October, as well as a few others that will be... Oh, and The Matrix as well in December. So all of those are going to be coming out next year on HBO Max the same day as theaters. And of course, Theater King Christopher Nolan has come out and hated against this thing. And there's a report on the Hollywood Reporter that says, and I quote, "Some of our industry's biggest filmmakers and most important movie stars went to bed the night before thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio and woke up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service." So that's just typical Christopher. Now, Tenet came out in theaters, did all right, all considering, and he was proud of that, whatever that means. So, well, okay, so to get back to what I think it's tough because obviously with the pandemic, I don't want anybody going to the theater unless it's like, you're the only person in the theater like some theaters have been doing. Like, other than that, I don't want people getting together for anything like that if they don't have to. I think it makes sense for entertainment purposes. I'm fine to watch Tom and Jerry at home. I don't mind. But I think it is, over the long term, going to hurt the theater business reviving itself afterwards, because with this being for the entire year now, people are going to get very comfortable, more than they already are, being at home watching a big blockbuster like Suicide Squad and Matrix, Dune. I want to see Dune in a theater, but if I have to, I'll watch it at home. But I think it is going to hurt theaters more so in the long run because, this huge revenue is going to be gone. And only like the diehard fans are going to be going to the theater, especially with COVID still being in full swing. I love it and hate it. I think it makes sense in a way, but also I can see why people are really pissed off.
Yeah, I'm not surprised in the least bit that this is where they decided to take it, especially since HBO Max is an AT&T product. and AT&T is trash. Ask anyone. I know. I'm a customer.
Yep.
And so I'm not even a little bit surprised that they went for something like this. I mean, this is the same company that, when they bought HBO, looked at the head of HBO and was like, oh, don't worry, you know, you're HBO, you run great, why would we mess with you? And then not too long after that, had a meeting with him where he looked and said, ha ha ha, I take it all back, batten down the hatches, and then HBO Max happened. And they're really trying to play in the same pool as Netflix, and Netflix does, you know, theatrical and digital releases. They don't do it for all of them, though. They only do it for their prestigious films, you know, the really name-grabbing ones. So I'm not surprised. It makes sense, given the pandemic, given that they are openly trying to turn HBO into a Netflix competitor directly, instead of just continuing to row their own boat and just be, you know, the adult streamer. Mm-hmm. But it is disheartening, and, you know, the theater business already had a uphill battle anyway. Theater viewership was declining. You know, movies were doing great, but the number of people that were, like, actually invested in going to the movies was getting worse and worse and worse. Their margins were getting worse and worse and worse because studios kept on being able to create these deals that kept on being worse for them. So it was an industry that was kind of screwed to begin with, but it had a lot working against it, and this doesn't help it. And I agree with that sentiment a lot. You know, some of their issues that they had before this were self-made. Some of them were made by a growing combative relationship between them and studios. And then it just finally was, honestly, it was put in the bed by COVID. And I don't think that theaters will ever really come back in any kind of meaningful way. The way that any people that call themselves movie fans would really like them to. And I think that that's probably just one of we can add it to the other, I guess, you know, several 100,000, you know, lost by COVID, and several other things that have been lost by COVID. You know, it's a whole year, it's graduations and normalcy. And so, you know, it's just unfortunately another COVID casualty. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, now, will you be, like, are you okay in theory watching a movie like The Matrix or Dune at home? Will you be satisfied?
I mean, will I be satisfied? No. But also, I guess the likelihood, and this is something that I once talked about on the show before, the likelihood of me also having a satisfactory theater experience was also relatively minimum.
That's true.
So, you know, it's kind of a wash. I guess this is just one instance where it's kind of a lose-lose, you know? If theaters came back, I tell you what, if theaters came back and theaters could finally be as good as theaters should be, and if they were as much, you know, worth the investment as I would like them to be, then, yeah, I would absolutely prefer to go and see all of these films in theaters. Absolutely, I would. I grew up going to theaters. I love theaters. I once saw 4 movies in one day, starting at a midnight of National Treasure 2, and then finishing with a 7 p.m. or a 7:30, it was something like that, of Sweeney Todd.
Nice.
So it was a great day. I love theaters. I love movies. And if I could get back to theaters, I would, but I would also then like theaters to meet me halfway and also get back to being worth a fuck. So that way I am not having an equal or better experience at home.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I love going to theaters even when the experience is not great, and it was one of my few social outings going to theater. So, you know, I kind of relied on that for communication. But no, I love the experience of being in a theater and seeing it on the big screen. And so I think that is something I'm very disappointed about. But I think even from a health perspective, I think it makes sense to have these movies released. Because I think, for one, in terms of money, for the most part, I'm sure the majority of families will be staying home as opposed to going to a theater, you know, I mean, just to protect people. And so I think that is going to cause the biggest hurt to theaters because, you know, most families are going to stay home to watch Tom and Jerry or, you know, probably not Suicide Squad, but hopefully not too many young kids seeing that. Yeah, it's a tough situation. I don't know if there's something else in particular, but we'll have to see how it goes. I'll be watching the majority of the movies at home. I won't be going to a theater, so it is what it is. It's the world we're in right now.
Yeah, I there's literally no movie in the world that is worth my health, so I'm not going to go and see any of these movies for the foreseeable future in theaters. So yeah, I'll be watching them at home on my TV. It's a very nice TV. I've got a nice sound system, so I'll be all right. But no, there's not a movie in the world that anyone should be risking their lives for in a theater. But also, as a counterpoint as well, and, to play devil's advocate to theaters and theater employees, they also need to be getting support from the government so that way they can actually stay closed and aren't trying to open in the middle of a health hazard, to try and remain solvent.
Yeah. Yeah. No movie besides National Treasure 2 is worth seeing.
Maybe Tom and Jerry.
Yes, maybe. I'm on the edge for that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, anything else about now? Is there one of these movies you're looking forward to seeing the most?
Dune, in earnestness, King Kong versus Godzilla, just because I am curious to see how they take what I thought was a pretty good, if not perfect, 2 Godzilla films and combine it with, I thought, one of the worst King Kong adaptations that has ever come out. And so I am curious to see how they turn this into, Batman versus Superman, but with 2 massive creatures. Yeah. I don't know if one of them is going to make it out on the end. I don't know if we're going to end up seeing Mechagodzilla in this thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm morbidly curious to watch whatever the gristmill churns out that is, Godzilla versus King Kong.
Yeah. We'll have to review Kong Skull Island sometime.
Deal.
Yeah.
I need to set the people straight on just how terrible that film is.
Yeah. Dune by far is the one I'm looking forward to most. The Suicide Squad, just because I like those characters for sure. Yeah, I guess thankfully there aren't a huge number of movies I'm not going to be seeing in theaters that I really want to see, But yeah, those 2 are my big ones.
Yeah, Suicide Squad I'll say as well.
Yeah. All right, well, should we get to Spider-Man 3?
Yeah, sure, why not?
All right, well, very recent piece of news. It has been announced that Tom Holland's Spider-Man 3, which will be a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it is confirmed to have Alfred Molina, who played Doc Ock in the Tobey Maguire films, return as Doc Ock. He is officially coming back as that character because apparently Spider-Man 3 will be delving into the multiverse aspect, similar to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse situation, I think. And then, although these are not totally confirmed yet, things could change due to contracts and all that, but there are talks with Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, as well as Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, to return as those characters, possibly. That will, we'll keep you updated on that, but that could happen as well. Paul, is this, like a birthday for you, having all these people come back?
All right, so I know for a fact that when they were talking about ideas for a Spider-Verse sequel, one of the ideas was to get Holland, Garfield, and Maguire to appear in that film. And those creators got told no. It's also pretty obvious that the MCU Phase 4 now is going to be delving into multiverse because we've got WandaVision, we've got Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and now we've got this announcement. Plus, we already had the universes kind of getting a little bit muddied with J.K. Simmons returning as J. Jonah Jameson in the second one.
Right.
Of the Tom Holland films, let me be clear. Since we're now talking about 3 different Spider-Man film series. So am I excited? Sure, why not? Because pretty much after Phase 3 was done, I kind of let go of the reins of the MCU and was like, if you go to shit, I still have all of this.
Yeah.
Joke's on you. So I'm fine with them doing whatever. The only thing I guess that bums me out is I think the Amazing Spider-Man universe was terrible. There's a reason that it ended, and I think that all of the people that are like, oh my god, it was so good, are a very small minority of people, and I think that the rest of the world is looking at it through rose-colored nostalgia glasses of like a time that didn't have Spider-Man in the MCU, because there's a reason that it ended. It was losing money film by film. So am I excited for that part of it to come back into it? No. Am I excited that this might open up the door to the Venom films being a part of the Holland Spider-Man films? Absolutely not. Am I excited that this might finally get me Spider-Man 4, maybe, one day, with John Malkovich as the Vulture? Absolutely I am. Yeah. Because if there's one thing I always felt robbed of, it was John Malkovich as the Joker in Sam Raimi's fourth Spider-Man film.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fun. I'm not surprised that they're doing multiverse stuff. My biggest note is just that there's a lot of shit in the Spider-Verse that I would rather not mingle with Tom Holland.
Yes. Well, yeah. Okay, so I'll say this, and it may sound mean, but oh well. As much as I love Tobey Maguire, I didn't hate the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but as much as I like those previous installments, there's almost nothing less interesting than having everyone come back for this movie. Yeah. To me, it strikes me as people are running out of ideas. Yeah. It doesn't seem like a clever bringing together of worlds and characters. It just feels like people are so out of new ideas for the characters that they have to bring in previously established aspects of the world. And so that part, I'm not. I really liked Into the Spider-Verse. I thought that was a really interesting one-off, but I kind of would like that to be the movie that it explores that kind of atmosphere and world. And I would kind of just like Tom Holland's Spider-Man 3 to just be another sequel. I liked Far From Home. It was fairly contained and simple, and I would just like another installment. Even if it's fairly cookie cutter, I still prefer that as opposed to a nostalgia,
No, absolutely. It feels I could spend the length of a whole episode of this show talking about my grievances with Sony and their managing of Spider-Man. I could be Martin Luther nailing that shit to the door, 99 issues. Because they have mismanaged a classic icon horribly. And, it seemed like we were finally going to get a complete Spider-Man trilogy that was a good Spider-Man trilogy that didn't have a lot of fiddling and meddling and fuckery, and like we were just going to finally get 3 good movies. Were they, the best possible comic book film? No. Were they even everyone's absolute number one favorite Spider-Man story? No. Some people still really love Spider-Man 2 more. But they were good. They were all really, really good. And we could have had a third one that ended on a high note. And instead, it honestly just feels like direct competition with the Flash movie, which is going and doing the whole multiple Batman thing. It's going to be Ezra Miller's Flash with Ben Affleck's Batman and Michael Keaton's Batman.
This is borderline barf-inducing.
And so, it's just... You're right. It is people running out of steam. It's like there are so many things from the Spider-Man lore, from Spider-Man comics, from that world that we could go in, get into, dive into, that would be interesting stories. We've still never done a Sinister Six story on film. And, you could even go and... You're right. A lot of this Spider-Verse exploring stuff should have just been reserved to Spider-Verse. That's what it was there for. So I'm not too excited about the notion, I guess, of what it stands for, but also again, like I said, I kind of let my hands off the reins, and if it's a shit show, it's a shit show, and I'm going to point my finger at Sony and blame them because I know exactly where this shit came from.
Yeah.
Because this stinks of another shit pile I have seen.
Yeah.
And so we'll see where it goes,
I agree. We know who to point the finger at if things go wrong.
Uh-huh. I know.
Now, are you excited for WandaVision?
Yeah, why not? I'm starved for content, and Mandalorian has gotten boring.
Yeah. Does that come out in January? Maybe?
Yeah, I think it's like mid-January. It's like in the teens, I think, or the 20s
Coming
of
up.
January. Yeah. I like those characters. Those are some of my favorite MCU characters. As far as MCU things that are coming, I'm actually currently probably less excited for more of the movies and more excited for more of the shows.
Yes, I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping it's almost like on par with Agent Carter. Like it's just like a cool little one-off series. So, we'll see.
And if WandaVision has 30-minute episodes, that's fine, because they're doing the whole, like, every episode is a different type of sitcom.
Oh, cool.
But I'm hoping that with the Bucky Barnes, with Falcon Winter Soldier, I'm hoping that we get 45-minute to hour episodes. I don't want sitcom length. I'm an adult. I'm coming to Disney Plus, not just for children's length content. I am still an adult buying into this service. I would like to be able to sit and watch 45 minutes of adult content. It doesn't have to be adult, but at least greater focus than an episode of The Mandalorian, which is structured literally like a cartoon.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so that one is still very much in early development, so it'll be a while before that one comes out, but we'll keep you updated if any interesting things come out. Paul, any other news pieces you want to bring up or anything we haven't touched on?
No, isn't Michael Keaton also coming back for this new Spider-Man movie, his Vulture character?
Who's to say? I mean,
well, if he is, then he's going to be in 2 different movies about a teenager hopping dimensions. So,
I mean, hey, hooray for Michael Keaton! I'm sure he's loving life, but God help everybody else.
He's laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah. So I guess that's about it for news. And I think we'll skip or we'll save the listener question for next week. But the filmbuds@gmail.com is where you can reach us at. Also Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @filmbuds. So please send us questions, comments, hellos, whatever. We like hearing from people. So I guess we can end off with our picks of the week. Paul, you been checking much out recently?
It's probably gonna have to be Godfather 2. Yeah, so like this last week, I haven't watched anything new in a minute. Who has? And so like I recently, I'll pick 2. I'll pick one that's kind of like it's a great film, you should watch it, Godfather Part 2. And then at the same time, me and my wife have been sort of in the month of December doing alternate sort of Christmas movies. So we looked at things that we thought sort of thematically or atmospherically kind of fit into the winter Christmas spirit. And one of those films was the animated film Rise of the Guardians.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? It really holds up. Like, is it gonna rock your world and be like the most groundbreaking news story that you've ever seen? No. But it's got some really fun world building. It's got some great design elements. It's got some good, really solid vocal performance. And if you're just tired of watching Benedict Cumberbatch slack and be lazy as the Grinch, then go and tell the kids to watch Rise of the Guardians instead. They'll get a real kick out of the Yetis.
Yeah. Did you see Klaus, the Netflix animated movie?
Mm-mm. Have you?
Yeah. It's just kind of a cool little interesting Christmas movie, so I was just curious.
Okay.
But continue.
No, that was all that I had.
Okay.
What are yours?
I rewatched the extended edition of The Fellowship of the Ring, which is still in my top 5 movies of all time. I love it.
That's a great one.
Yeah, and I think I'll continue watching the rest of the trilogy. I do it about once a year.
Okay.
And yeah, it's amazing. It's emotional. The level of detail is incredible. And maybe not everyone agrees with this if you're maybe more detached, but for like a 3.5, 4 hour movie, the pacing is like nearly perfect. Like it flows so well, even with those extended sequences. And I think I prefer the extended over the theatrical as well.
Absolutely. No, that's a great one. Lauren and I recently, we did the 3 Hobbit films and the 3 Lord of the Rings films, and between each one we would do all the appendices for that film. And so, yeah, after going through all 3 Hobbit films, Fellowship was such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
No, that's a great one. That's a really solid pick.
Did you see the R-rated extended edition of The Battle of the Five Armies?
I have, yeah.
Any thoughts?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on the Battle of Five Armies, just as a whole movie. But that entire battle sequence was gibberish. Like, for a man who really did a great job at giving geography to these massive battle sequences in Two Towers and Return of the King, you get to the Battle of Five Armies, and it's visual nonsense. Like, it's chaos. I don't know where things really are in relation to each other. Like, I objectively know where things are, but like, I don't know how you actually get geographically from A to B. Yeah. And that entire sequence inside of the castle is just lunacy. And in the extended cut especially, there's this moment. This is a great example of continuity going out the window for a beat in a story that you didn't need, that then gets put into an extended edition, which is really just bloat. There's this moment where Alfred is like in his little dress and he's in drag.
Oh, it's brutal.
And Luke Evans makes his joke, nice blouse or whatever it is. And Alfred, shuffs his gold coin filled breasts, around and then walks off screen. And then in the very next scene in the extended cut, it's Gandalf fighting a troll. And somehow Alfred is now inside of the catapult mechanism of a dead cave troll, but the catapult mechanism is not fired, it is armed and loaded.
Right.
And Alfred tries to sneak out of the cave troll sack, and like a gold coin falls out and triggers him, and he shoots out and dies. But the question is, he was on like the ramparts. He was on like the second floor of some building, like on some walkway with Bard. And the next time we see him, he has now gotten downstairs into a courtyard to a dead troll and climbed into its armed catapult mechanism in drag.
Peter Jackson should be ashamed.
That sums up, I think, just how much of a shit show the extended cut of the Battle of Five Armies is.
Yeah. And I mean, for one, and we can talk about it at some point, I'm sure, but like having so much CG and the floating cameras, that kills the geography of the world.
It does. It really does.
But, and then the other thing, I watched the first episode on Amazon Prime of The Affair with, that's a Showtime series originally. And this has Ruth Wilson, and I can't remember the main guy's name. He's been in other stuff, though. But this is a romance drama about this father who goes with his family to a beach house for the summer, and he meets this young woman played by Ruth Wilson, who is awesome. And he like immediately falls in love with her and wants to be with her. And it's interesting because the first half of the episode is done from his point of view, and then the second half is done from her point of view of how the two characters come together or meet. And the first half from his is done, when you see Ruth Wilson, it's almost all temptation as to what she's doing. Like everything that she's doing is leading him to want to be with her. But then when you see it from her perspective, she's doing nothing to tempt him to be with her. And so it's pretty interesting to see a male versus female perspective of the same situation. The only thing I would say is it starts off with some very like overly serious moments that I was really turned off by, but once you get past that and you get the feeling of the show, it's quite well done.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's interesting. But again, I've only seen the pilot, but it was pretty solid. Yeah, I think that might be about it, Paul. Might be about it. Yeah. Anything else you want to mention?
No, I think I'm all good.
All right. Well, I guess that about is it for the show this week. Now, next week, Paul, I had brought up, now, Mank, David Fincher's new film, is on Netflix. I don't know if there's anything else you have been interested in reviewing.
Mank sounds great to me.
All right. And I know Tenet comes out at some point. You know, we could throw that in at some point, but I think that all depends on exactly when it's released and what the...
December 15th on disc.
Okay. Now, does that include, like, renting? Or is that, like...
Not sure.
Okay. Well, we'll review Tenet at some point, I'm sure. But I guess Mank for next week, which is on Netflix now. And yeah, it's... well, Paul, I mean, it's been great, man. I always appreciate you taking the time. It's always great chatting.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I look forward to watching Mank. Everyone, before we review Mank, should go and do the homework. Watch Citizen Kane.
Yes. Yes.
Do your reading class.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, that'll be a good show for next week. We might maybe get Jacob on, might get Chloe on, you know, we'll see. And we might have some fun bonus content coming in the next month or two, so stay updated for that. And yeah, it's been great. Please, everybody, stay safe, wear a mask, you know, do the right thing, do the sensible thing, just please be safe and be smart. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we'll see you next time.